The heavy obsidian-tinted windows of the command center overlooked the entrance to the vault, a subterranean fortress buried 300 feet beneath the Siberian tundra. Usually, this place was the pinnacle of global security. Today, it was a graveyard. If you love stories of hidden power, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. General Marcus Vance clutched the edge of the tactical table so hard his knuckles turned white. On the screens before him, the feeds were a chaotic mess of static and blood. The Unbeatables, a rogue faction of the Black Ops Chimera unit, had taken the facility. These weren't just soldiers. They were genetically enhanced apex predators led by Colonel Silas, a man who had survived more assassination attempts than most men had birthdays. They had bypassed every biometric lock and were now holding the base commander hostage in a reinforced panic room. The vault held nuclear launch keys that could reset the global order if they fell into the wrong hands. "We've lost 3 Tier 1 squads in 40 minutes, the lieutenant reported, his voice trembling as he replayed the footage of elite soldiers being dismantled in seconds. "Silas has turned our own defense system into a slaughterhouse. He's demanding a total withdrawal of all military presence from the North Sector in 1 hour, or he starts the countdown." The general didn't look at the lieutenant. He looked at the girl sitting on a metal crate in the corner, far away from the glowing screens and frantic officers. Kaylin Echo Vance was a ghost in a flight jacket. At 19, she looked like she belonged in a university library, not a war zone. She was small, with pale skin and eyes that seemed to constantly shift focus, as if she was seeing things or hearing things that no one else could. She was the only surviving subject of Project Siren, a top-secret experiment designed to turn the human nervous system into a weaponized sonar. Years ago, Kaylin had been raised in a laboratory where she was taught to navigate mazes in total darkness, guided only by the clicks of her tongue and the vibration of the air against her skin. The scientists had surgically enhanced her auditory cortex, allowing her to process sound frequencies that would drive a normal human insane. She didn't just hear sound. She saw it as a shimmering geometric grid. "I don't need a squad. They are too loud. They breathe too heavily. They create vibrations that Silas can track," Kaylin said, her voice flat and strangely hollow. "I need the frequency logs of the bunker's ventilation system and the recorded heartbeats of the targets from the last hour. And I want the lights turned off. Completely. I want this bunker to be as silent and dark as the deep ocean." "Kaylin," the general warned, his voice heavy with fear. "Silas isn't a normal man. He has cybernetic optics. He has thermal vision and acoustic sensors embedded in his skull. Darkness won't stop him." Kaylin stood up, pulling a custom-built headset over her ears. The device was jagged, covered in sensors that synced directly with her brain. "Darkness isn't for me, General. It's for them. They think they know what fear is because they've seen death. I'm going to show them that fear is what you feel when you can't even trust your own heart to beat correctly." As Kaylin stepped into the primary elevator shaft, she didn't use the lift. She attached a specialized magnetic tether and descended 300 feet in total silence, moving like a spider on a thread. The air grew colder as she descended, smelling of ozone, spent brass, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. She landed in the main lobby, where the lights were flickering and dying. In the distance, she could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of a mercenary's boots. To a normal soldier, it was just a sound. To Kaylin, it was a map. She could hear the weight of his gear, the slight limp in his left leg, and the fact that he was chewing gum to settle his skyrocketing cortisol levels. She tapped her tablet, activating the bunker's internal speaker system. She didn't play music or send a message. She played infrasound at $18.9 \text hertz $. This frequency is known as the ghost frequency. It's below the threshold of human hearing, but the human body feels it in its marrow. It causes the chest to tighten, the eyes to vibrate slightly, and the brain to enter a state of primal, unexplained dread. As the infrasound filled the halls, Kaylin began her hunt. The first obstacle was a 3-man sniper team positioned in the high-ceilinged atrium. They were using state-of-the-art pulse vision that could see through walls. Kaylin didn't hide. She stood in the open, but she began to hum. The pitch of her hum was exactly inverse to the frequency of their pulse vision. On their screens, Kaylin simply vanished, her acoustic signature canceling out their sensors. Target lost, the sniper yelled into his comms. Check your hardware, Miller. Silas's voice growled back. Nobody just disappears. Kaylin moved beneath their perch. She reached into her belt and pulled out a small glass vial filled with iron filings and a micro battery. She shattered it against the metal support beam. The magnetic field she generated disrupted their scopes, turning their high-tech sights into a blur of static. As they scrambled to fix their gear, she mimicked the sound of their commanding officer's voice through their own encrypted headsets. Miller, fall back to the secondary rally point. Now. Miller, confused but conditioned to obey, stood up. As he turned, Kaylin was already there. She didn't use a gun. She used a neural jammer. A high decibel burst directly into his auditory nerve. Miller didn't even have time to scream. His world tilted $90 \text $. His brain, unable to process the sensory overload, shut down his motor functions. He collapsed, his body twitching as he lost all sense of balance. One down, Kaylin whispered. Entering the ventilation network. She crawled through the shafts like a phantom. The metal didn't creak under her weight. She knew exactly where the rivets were strongest, where the vibrations would be absorbed. She reached the barracks, where 4 more of Silas's elite men were bunkered down. These were the Iron Circle, Silas's personal guard. They had thermal goggles and were positioned back-to-back in a defensive formation. Stay tight, their leader, Tank barked. We saw the feed. It's just one girl using sound tricks. Don't believe your ears, look at your thermals. Kaylin smiled in the dark. She rolled 3 acoustic decoys across the floor. They didn't explode. They began to emit the sound of a full tactical team breaching the north door. The heavy thud of boots, the clatter of flashbangs, the shout of go, go, go. The mercenaries opened fire on the door, lead shredding the metal. But Kaylin wasn't at the door. She was in the shadows of the ceiling, watching them waste their ammunition. As the thick smoke from their rifles filled the room, she activated an ultrasonic pulse. This was a wave of physical pressure. It hit the smoke, causing it to swirl into terrifying humanoid shapes. In the dark, the mercenaries saw what looked like a dozen ghosts charging them through the haze. They're everywhere, one shouted. Kaylin dropped. She used her obsidian blade to cut the power cables of their thermal goggles. In an instant they were blind. In the absolute darkness, Kaylin began to whisper. She used their names. She whispered their deepest fears, secrets she had pulled from their personnel files during the descent. Tank, you remember the fire in Kabul, don't you? Her voice seemed to come from inside his own head. Shut up. Get out of my head. Tank roared, firing his shotgun into the ceiling. Kaylin moved between them like a surgeon. She used the siren's touch, a high-voltage strike to the carotid sinus. In 30 seconds, the barracks went silent. 4 elite killers lay unconscious, their hearts beating at a frantic, terrified pace. They weren't dead, but their nervous systems would be rebooting for hours. By the time Kaylin reached the central hub, Colonel Silas knew his men were being taken out by something he couldn't understand. He stood in the center of the command ring, his cybernetic eyes scanning the room in every spectrum: thermal, ultraviolet, and motion. He was a mountain of a man, his body a map of scars and high-tech implants. He had the nuclear launch keys chained to his wrist. I see you, little girl. Silas roared, his voice a rasp of metal. You're hiding in the subflooring. I can hear your heart. I'm going to rip it out and see if it makes a sound. Can you really hear it, Silas? Kaylin's voice came from the overhead speakers, echoing in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint. Or are you just hearing what I want you to hear? Suddenly, the speakers began to play a rhythmic thump-thump, thump-thump. It was Silas's own heartbeat, recorded from the bunker's medical sensors. Kaylin began to speed up the recording. As the sound grew louder and faster, Silas's own body began to react. This was entrainment. The human heart is a slave to external rhythm. Silas's chest began to heave. His pulse climbed to $160, $180, $200 beats per minute. He was having a forced, artificial cardiac event. "Stop it," Silas screamed, firing his heavy caliber pistol at the speakers. He blew out one, but the sound shifted to another. Then another. Kalen stepped out from behind a pillar, holding a thermal mirror. Silas turned and fired. The mirror shattered, but it was just a decoy. "Behind you," Kalen whispered. Silas spun, swinging an armored fist that could have crushed a tank's hull. Kalen didn't duck. She simply stepped into his blind spot, the millisecond of time it took for his cybernetic eye to refresh its digital image. She was faster than his hardware. She drove her elbow into his ribs with a vibratory strike. She timed the hit to the exact frequency of his armor's resonance. The reinforced ceramic plating didn't just crack, it disintegrated. Silas gasped, his lung collapsing under the pressure. He tried to grab her, but Kalen grabbed his wrist and pressed a small, copper wire against his cybernetic temple. "System override," she said. She sent a massive EMP burst through the wire. Silas's cybernetic eye flickered, sparked, and went dark. The hardware in his brain short-circuited. The unbeatable colonel fell to his knees, clutching his head as his digital world crashed into a sea of white noise and agony. He was a giant defeated by a whisper. The vault was finally quiet. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation and the distant sobbing of the rescued base commander. Kalen walked toward the panic room, her boots clicking softly on the metal floor. She bypassed the biometric lock with a flick of her tablet and stepped inside. The commander looked up, terrified, expecting a monster. He found a girl in an oversized jacket, looking tired. "The general is waiting for you, sir," Kalen said, her voice returning to its normal tone. She walked back through the bunker, passing the fallen members of the Unbeatables. They were awake now, but they couldn't move. The infrasound had wrecked their motor control. They watched her pass with wide, terrified eyes. They didn't see a girl. They saw a force of nature. They had been trained to fight armies, but they had no defense against a girl who could weaponize the very air they breathed. Back in the command center, General Vance watched the final feed as Kalen exited the elevator. The room was silent. No one cheered. They were too afraid of the girl who had just dismantled a legend. Kalen walked up to the general and handed him her headset. "The frequency logs were inaccurate," she said. "The ventilation in Sector 4 has a rattle. You should have that fixed. It's a tactical weakness." The general looked at her, his voice a whisper. "You dismantled the most dangerous unit in the world in under 20 minutes. How?" Kalen looked at the monitors, where the elite soldiers were being carried out on stretchers. "Most people think war is about who has the biggest gun," she said. "But the body is just a machine, and every machine has a frequency. If you know the frequency, you can break the machine without ever touching it." As she walked out of the base, the wind of the Siberian tundra whipping her hair, Kalen Vance disappeared into the white. She had entered the vault as an experiment, but she left as a legend. The world was about to learn that in the theater of war, the loudest scream is the one no one can hear. If you enjoyed this story, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and stay sharp.